In an ancient world where religions did not only explain the universe but also the human soul, one of the most radical and fascinating doctrines in history emerged: Manichaeism. It was not just a religion, it was a way of understanding reality. An answer to a question that has followed humanity since the beginning: why does evil exist? To understand it, we must travel back to the 3rd century after Christ, to a region between Persia and Mesopotamia. It was a time of intense cultural exchange, where traditions such as Zoroastrianism, early Christianity, and Eastern philosophies coexisted and influenced one another. At that crossroads appeared a singular figure: Mani. Mani did not intend to create just another religion. His ambition was far greater. He saw himself as the final messenger of humanity, the heir to a spiritual lineage that included Buddha, Zoroaster, and Jesus. His goal was to unify truth, but he did so in a radically different way. For Manichaeism, the universe was not a harmonious creation, but an eternal battlefield between two opposing principles: light and darkness, good and evil. Not as metaphors, but as absolute realities. Unlike other religions of the time, where evil could be seen as a deviation or an imperfection, Manichaeism proposed something far more unsettling. Evil is not an absence. It is a force. A force as real as good itself. And the human being is where both meet. According to this vision, the soul belongs to the realm of light, while the body is part of the material world associated with darkness. To live, therefore, is to exist in constant tension. We are not entirely one nor entirely the other. We are a mixture, and that idea, with important differences, is not so distant from many modern religions. In Christianity, for example, we find a constant struggle between good and evil, between God and sin, between the soul and the temptations of the world. However, there is a crucial distinction. Evil is not an independent force, but a deprivation of good. And this is where Manichaeism becomes uncomfortable, because it breaks that balance. It proposes a universe divided into two eternal and irreconcilable realities, an idea that deeply influenced figures such as Augustine of Hippo, who followed Manichaeism before becoming one of Christianity's most influential thinkers and ultimately rejecting it for that very reason. St. Augustine argued that accepting two absolute principles, good and evil, would limit the power of God, and that critique would shape Christian theology for centuries. But the influence did not disappear. In Islam, although structured differently, we also find a strong awareness of good and evil, of divine guidance versus deviation. It is not Manichaeism, but it shares that constant moral tension. And beyond religion, the concept has survived in the way we think. When we divide the world into good and evil, when we simplify reality into extremes, when we believe one side represents light and the other darkness, we are, often without realizing it, thinking in deeply Manichaean terms. For centuries, Manichaeism spread from Persia to the Roman Empire, across Central Asia, and even into China. It became one of the most influential religions of its time. But its very radical nature also sealed its fate. It was persecuted by the Persian Empire, rejected by Christianity, and later by Islam. And slowly it disappeared as a visible structure, but not as an idea. Because Manichaeism was not only a religion, it was a way of interpreting conflict, and perhaps that is why it still lives on. Not in temples, not in rituals, but in the human mind, in our tendency to divide, to simplify, to seek clarity in a complex world. Perhaps the question is not whether Manichaeism disappeared, but whether we ever stopped thinking like Manichaeans. Because deep down, we all feel that struggle between what we believe is right and what pulls us in the opposite direction. Between the light we aspire to be and the shadow that inevitably follows us. And perhaps centuries later, the question Mani raised still remains. Is the world truly divided into two opposing forces? Or are we the ones who need to believe that it is? If you enjoy this kind of content, if you like to explore, question, and understand the deeper ideas that shape our world, you can like and subscribe to the channel, because here we continue exploring the concepts that define the way we think.